Hello, my name again is Judy Gordon. I'm the VP of Marketing at WireWheel. Welcome to our webinar on fulfilling data subject access requests, WireWheel, which we are hosting in conjunction with Microsoft. We're looking forward to a really great discussion, and we hope to hear from those of you in the audience. Please put your questions in the Q&A in the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. So let's get started. First, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. From WireWheel, we have Rick Buck, who's our Chief Privacy Officer. From Microsoft, we have Hamad Rajoub, who's the Director of Microsoft Purview and Priva ecosystem. And from WireWheel, Sheridan Clemens, Senior Engagement Manager from WireWheel. Welcome to all of you. Why don't we start by just having you give a short introduction. Rick?
Hey, Judy, thank you for having us. On behalf of the rest of the panelists, very excited about today's session. I'm Rick Buck, I'm CPO here at WireWheel. I've been with the company a year and a half now. I've been doing privacy for a very long time and see some familiar faces on our session today. So welcome and thank you for joining. I hope you'll get some good information here on how we're looking at privacy and DSARs from a state perspective, as well as from a practical implementation point of view, which Hamad and Sheridan will spend some time talking to you about.
Okay, great. Thanks, Hamad.
Thanks, Judy, Rick, and team. Super excited to be here. My name is Hamad Rajoub. I work as Director of Product Marketing, and I look after Microsoft Purview and Priva ecosystem, meaning all of our compliance, risk, and privacy-related product offerings. So super excited to be here and can't wait to share all the good stuff that both WireWheel and Microsoft have been working over the last several months.
Okay, great. And Sheridan.
Hi, Sheridan Clemens here. Super excited to be supporting this webinar today. I've been supporting privacy and security requirements for the last, 10 to 15 years, and joined WireWheel, I guess, about 6 months ago, and been working pretty heavily with working with our clients implementing various different solutions to support DSAR. So. Okay,
great. Thanks, Sheridan. All right. Now I'm just going to go over the agenda. Let you know what we're going to cover on the webinar. First, we're going to start with Rick, who's going to talk about the requirements for data subject access request fulfillment and what the challenges are. Then Hamad is going to talk about the challenges and pain points with fulfilling DSAR with unstructured data and how the Microsoft Priva WireWheel integration helps with that. And then Sheridan is going to go through a demonstration of our integration. So I'm going to hand it off to Rick. Kick it off, Rick.
Great. Thanks, Judy. And next slide. Great. Perfect. So hi, everybody. So to frame this this conversation up, let's talk a little bit about what the law requires. DSARs, data subject requests, SARs, there's all kinds of acronyms people are using to refer to access requests. We're born from the mother of all privacy laws, GDPR, who has a longstanding heritage of privacy being a fundamental right, and data subject rights in particular being something that should be available. That has most recently spilled to the United States. Our friends in California passed the first law, which seems like many, many years ago. And to date, they have been joined by 26 other states who have introduced somewhere around 51 or 52 different bills. Many of them have failed. Many of them are still in committee. 4 currently have passed, California, Colorado, Virginia, and Utah. And they most recently have been joined by Connecticut. They all have a lot in common. They all have been steeped in GDPR principles. And while they do have many things in common, there are many things that make them unique. Next slide, please. So just to look at a very high level of the states, again, if we think about this from a consumer rights point of view, and the consumer rights in many respects are what these subject access requests subject requests are really focused on. The state laws all have an assortment of things that make them common and different. Some have a private right of action, some don't. Some require privacy notices, some don't. Those that require privacy notices talk a little differently about how those should be presented. From a rights point of view, there's concepts of correction and do not sell. And from a consent point of view, do you need to collect it to do things like automated decision making or for the use of sensitive data or for selling data, and how do you empower all that? And we're going to talk a little bit more particularly about all that over the next couple of slides. So next slide, please. Nope. Keep going back. Back. Way back. Other direction. Oh yeah, keep going. Nope. Sorry, folks. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Thank you. So let's talk first about privacy rights. As you can see, the states, again, based very similarly on GDPR, have presented a wide variety of rights that are available to people who live in their states. Things like access and deletion, and portability, and to some degree correction, seem to be ubiquitous across all of the states. Where they start to differ are things like automated decision making. California seems to be right now the only state that is going to allow for opting out of automated decision making. Targeted behavioral advertising, while that probably is close enough to it, is only required in 3 of the states. The opting out of processing, opting out of profiling, unique to Virginia and Colorado, respectively. One of the things, so knowing what options to present to people when they come to you to exercise their rights, it can be a challenge. It can be managed at the state level. It can be managed at the national level and make it an all-encompassing, most restrictive, jurisdictional regime that you're mapping around. One of the things that makes this whole rights thing really interesting and now newly complicated is that when we think about exercising subject rights, we think about it in terms of these are our customers, our consumers, our prospects that are coming to us and saying, what do you know about me, delete me, correct me, etc. California, through the effective date of CPRA coming up in January, is going to extend these rights to employees. And with employee rights, this gets a lot more complicated than it does with consumer rights. We'll talk about that in the following slides. But if we can move on to the next slide, we can talk about a little bit more why that might be. So before we talk about the employee data in particular, as we think about data and when we're looking on fulfilling these subject rights, data lives in a number of different places. Most familiarly, we think about data living in structured data environments. Structured data environments are what we might refer to as databases or data lakes or data repositories. The structured data lives in predefined formats. It lives in fixed formats. It's easily queried. It's got rules around it. The rules have controls around it. We know what use cases data can be used for, what it can't be used for. When somebody says, I need to find data based on the category that they are of a data subject, you know where to look for it. And so when data lives in those environments, it's very easy to query those and then go back and honor the subject requests. Where it gets complicated is in unstructured data. Unstructured data is exactly what it might sound like. It is unstructured data. It lives in places that are not predefined, that are not in specific formats, that are not easy to query or to analyze, that don't necessarily have rules about how that data could be used or where it goes. Examples of where that might live are in PDFs, are in the vast suite of Microsoft Office products that you might use, particularly in Word or Excel. They might live in Salesforce or in your texts or in your emails or images or posts on social media. And so trying to find all that, make sense of that, and being able to report on that becomes a challenge. Next slide, please. When that information gets identified, sorry, I back up. So redaction is a concept where data that is irrelevant or inappropriate needs to be obfuscated. Tying this back into where I was going with the rights and with California and employees, employee data gets very complicated when it comes to subject requests, because employee data, in many cases, beyond the obvious structured databases that data may live in, employee data lives pervasively across, as I mentioned earlier, Word documents, text messages, Salesforce instances. Oftentimes when employee data is being requested, other employee data becomes exposed or becomes a part of that query. So I put in, for example, to my employer, what do you know about me request? And in the process of looking for what you know about me, a whole bunch of emails have come up, and information about all of you is in my emails because you and I were having conversations. Your email address is there, personal information about you is there, comments that you've made are there because they were part of those documents. They are completely out of scope of the request, and as such need to be obfuscated or redacted from what is being presented to the person who's asking for that information. And the challenges for redaction are, one, being able to find all of the employee data in the first place, and then second of which, to be able to parse and obfuscate the data that is irrelevant to the task. Next slide, please. So WireWheel, this is a core competency, and our ability to intake and manage and fulfill data subject requests is a full life cycle event. It starts obviously with the consumer, the data subject, making the initial request. The verification and validation of that request happens through the interface. Then queries sends signals back to our brands who take the appropriate either automated or manual actions to look for the data that's being presented, to be able to produce that data, and again, to be able to redact it and obfuscate data that it's inappropriate, and to be able to show the data that the data subject or the consumer or the employee was looking for in a safe and secure way through our portals. And then, of course, to be able to report on that and to document that and enable our customers to be able to not only fulfill those requests, but to enable the back-end systems that will honor any of the downstream implications of that. This is something that we think about every day. This is something that we empower our customers on. To that end, I will pass the ball on now to Hamad, who's going to talk about it from an actual day-to-day implementation point of view and some real-life application of this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick. Once again, thanks, WireWheel team, for having us here. I'm super excited to share all the good work that Microsoft, Priva, and WireWheel teams have been doing over the last several months. If you can go to the next slide, please. While that is coming, I'll really focus on doing a little bit of context setting from Microsoft perspective. I'll share what we're hearing from our customers and how Microsoft's Priva offering and Priva's integration with WireWheel solves for our joint customers' privacy-related challenges. Let's go back to what Rick was talking about a little bit in terms of the ever-increasing data privacy regulation. regulations. Privacy applies to the entire data lifecycle, all the way from data collection to data storage to access to transfer to retention and all the way to deletion. So it's a complex lifecycle, and privacy applies to each and every one of those stages. And organizations have to deal with many regulatory requirements, and some of the notable ones that kind of just pop up more often than others are the data minimization or data hoarding piece, the cross-border data transfer piece. And most importantly, for the context of our conversation today, as Rick was talking about, the subject right request piece. That is like any employee, any customer can request an organization to provide them with all the personal data that they've collected for that specific person. So that's the kind of space we're coming from. If you can go to the next slide, we can put a customer lens on it. And I want to talk to you all about what we, while working with our customers and seeing them implement these privacy requirements in their organizations, what are the signals that we have captured? What are the insights that we have come up with? And we've identified key gaps and opportunities really to solve for. One of the things that kind of just stand out in that context is that privacy trainings is done periodically, annually, and that does not really help employees, as they kind of tend to lose track of time and context of what's needed versus not, and that's just kind of not a scalable way of doing it. 80% of the organizations are using manual processes for all the things that Rick was talking about, like they're doing data mapping manually, they're using spreadsheets, emails, in-person conversations to understand where the data lives, where it moves from one region to the other, and so on. So that's really not scalable, and it's really cumbersome. Research also shows that 98% of these organizations have not fully automated subject right request management. So while it is a core piece of privacy requirements, it is still not automated in most customer organizations. There's still manual processes in place. The use of Excel sheets, the emails, and how the data is collected and collaborated on across various teams is still cumbersome. But if you add the attributes of confidentiality and identifying, hey, if the data is part of legal hold and so on, that equation becomes that much more complex. So those are the three big signals that we're seeing in terms of our customer conversations and our research. If you can build the slide, if you click on it. What we're also learning from our customers is that well, they have to respond to subject right requests as those regulations become imminent, and some of them are already in market today. They find it very, very difficult to gain visibility, especially into the personal data, particularly in the unstructured data environments, as Rick was talking about. And this process is really complicated. And not having it automated at scale, organizations are spending a ton of money, time, and resources, as you can see on this slide, like $200,000 per month to respond to subject right requests. And that's creating a lot of friction and challenges for our customers. And that's where really Microsoft perspective comes in terms of how we look at this left to right. If you can go to the next slide, please. So I want to spend a quick couple of minutes on sharing our Microsoft perspective on this privacy landscape. Let's build the slide out. Our CEO, Satya Nadella, recently said that all of us will have to think about the digital experiences that we create to really treat privacy as a human right. That's how core and fundamental it is to everything that we do at Microsoft. And Microsoft Priva is our privacy solution that helps companies safeguard personal data and build privacy resilient workplaces. Step one is still the same. It's about how do we enable discovery of personal data automatically instead of using surveys and spreadsheets and water cooler chats. Organizations also need visibility into associated risks once the data is identified. And that's where Microsoft Priva can come and help identify privacy risks arising from oversharing, data hoarding, cross-border data transfers. It helps organizations automate their privacy operations by enabling customizable out-of-the-box policy templates for, like we talked about, data overexposure, data minimization, as well as data transfer. And once the policy templates are deployed, it can then, it's able to detect these risks and alert, for example, privacy admins about the violation. So immediate actions can be taken. All of that is automated and happens at scale. Additionally, Microsoft Priva also helps customers detect data conflicts, like I talked about the legal holds or confidentiality. All of that is built in, especially from a subject right request perspective. The other interesting piece in terms of how we look at solving this problem at scale is that we want to empower employees to make smart data decisions, data handling decisions. And we allow admins to interact with information workers within the productivity tools, like within the context of a Teams conversation, within the context of a email using Outlook. So information workers receive kind of like email digests, which tell them, hey, is this data relevant for you? Like, do you want to take any remediation actions? All within the context of an email in an Outlook environment. So that just kind of makes it enabling privacy in the flow of work. For today's webinar, of course, I want to really focus on highlighting data subject access request aspect of the equation. And Microsoft Preview allows us to automate and manage subject right requests at scale. Once the subject request comes in, the solution then automatically gathers all the relevant data within the Microsoft 365 environment. So think of all that's unstructured data. Let's think of your emails, Teams chats, OneDrive, SharePoints, all of that. And not only it identifies all of the data, it also detects data conflicts for legal holds and confidentiality. And while all of that is happening, we enable stakeholders to collaborate using Teams and emails and so on. There's also, we understand that privacy is a very workflow heavy process. So we have enabled Power Automate integration that comes built in with previous solution. So we allow customers to create workflows such as ability to add, for example, calendar reminders, because each of these requests have a timeline associated with that. So you can automate that. We also enable things like creating tracking tickets by the likes of ServiceNow. And they're just sky is the limit, right? You can just kind of create a number of workflows to drive automation. There's also built-in review process in terms of annotation and redaction of content before it is encrypted. If you can go to the next slide, I'm kind of speaking to the workflow. Just want to paint the full big picture here for our audiences. If you can build the slide out, so then can leverage the built-in review, annotate, redact content, and once all of that is done, the content is encrypted and handed over to the requester. So it's like a full scalable, automated, built-in workflow that enables us to solve for subject right requests from a customer perspective as the data sits in Microsoft 365. But more importantly, if you can go to the next slide, we understand that our customers we want to meet our customers where they are in their privacy journey. And we know that most organizations are either doing it manually, or they have homegrown line of business applications, or have invested in third-party ecosystem solutions that are using to manage their privacy requirements. That's why we have built our privacy subject right request APIs that enables Microsoft Preview solution to integrate with their customers' existing infrastructure, as well as the broader privacy ecosystem. So our integration that we're talking about with WireWheel today is built on using these very APIs. So now our joint customers can respond to subject right requests in a unified manner across their entire digital state, covering both structured and unstructured data, including Microsoft 365 environment. So just a ton of value in a built-in scalable integration that we enable and bring value to our joint set of customers. So let's look at the workflow. How does it happen? I'm going to walk you through this workflow, and then I'll pass it to Sheridan, who will show you the demo. So it's not just theory. The product integration is live and it's available, and you all can see shortly. So let's look at the workflow. So let's build the slide out. So Dave Donaldson is an employee or a customer who initiates a DSAR request in a WireWheel context, WireWheel branded user experience, or a customer co-branded user experience. And since that customer or employee data sits in Microsoft 365, that request comes into Microsoft Preview solution using these privacy APIs. And once the request comes in, remember the workflow from the previous slide, all of that happens in the background, all the magic, getting all the data from all of the sources, SharePoint, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, OneDrive, Teams, and all of that. The data just kind of gets collected. Of course, we're looking at where there is a legal hold, what's the confidentiality, and all of that workflow. There's a collaboration also going on using Teams channels, emails, stakeholders are coming together, there's a redaction happening. All of that magic is happening in the background just because the API request came in and that process got kicked off. That also allows us to Once the request is done, once we kind of find out all the redaction, all that piece is done, now we have created that package that contains all the data in an encrypted form, is ready to be sent back to WireWheel user experience that kind of Dave kickstarted previously. We also allow WireWheel to poll and find out, hey, what happened to that data request that we sent for Dave? And just kind of like there's a full feedback loop. The request comes in, and then you can poll for the status, and all of that magic happens in the background in Microsoft Priva. And once we send the request back, response back into WireWheel, imagine WireWheel is also not only looking at Microsoft 365, but also looking at other structured and unstructured data sources, Salesforce, SAP, and so on. And then all of the data gets packaged up from Dave's perspective in a single unified response and sent back to him, including Microsoft 365 data. So that's kind of like how this workflow happens. This is all built in. This is available today. This is scalable. And you all can see a little bit as I pass it to Sheridan to walk you through in terms of what the user experience looks like in terms of real product demo. I know I've talked a lot, but I think once you look at the product end to end, it'll kind of create a more vivid picture in your mind, and you'll be able to see the value that we're trying to bring to the market together. So with that, Sheridan, back to you.
Thanks, Ahmad. Yeah, this is really exciting. So let me quickly bring up a demo here. Move some screens out of my way. So we start the process, our integration with Priva inside of our, it's what we call a trust center. It's where basically any data subject, an employee, or or a consumer would be able to come in and enter in a request. So we navigate down to submit a data subject request, and then when they click on that page, it will open up a form. Speed it up here just a little bit. It'll open up a form, and they can fill out their information. Once they submit this form, it creates a ticket inside of the WireWheel system, but it will also send them an email to go ahead and verify their email address, fill out an affidavit, make sure they're signing, so that we have the total legal permission required in order to fulfill this request. Skip ahead 2 seconds. They sign it. So now we're inside of like a privacy office's view inside of WireWheel. They can navigate to requests. When they submit one, it'll go ahead and open up a ticket. You can see all the information about the individual is on the right-hand side. It's all initially obfuscated so that there's no leaking of PII or anything like that to anybody who doesn't need it. You can quickly grab all that information if you needed to search other places or reference it. For this particular one, so I think it's important to point out, inside of WireWheel, when you create a new data subject request, we have various workflows that can be kicked off, and those can be customized to ask a privacy professional questions or fill out information about the request to make sure it's valid, to make sure that we're assigning tasks to the right people. And what makes WireWheel really powerful is that we're more of like the quarterback or the navigator, providing instructions to multiple different systems to go ahead and fill these requests. So in this case, we've got Microsoft 365's Priva integration, but potentially you could integrate with many different other systems, whether cloud-based or not, to fulfill these requests. We can automate the search and discovery of the data within those systems, pull that back. It really saving privacy professionals quite a bit of time, and system professionals quite a bit of time in fulfilling DSARs. So we show the Microsoft 365 integration. We hop over to Priva. Priva, this is the landing page for Priva, and it's got some pretty cool stuff inside of Priva itself. So within just the Priva, and this is whether it's somebody who would be in charge of monitoring the request specifically for Priva would come in here and see dashboards that provide reporting on how many open requests they have, what the status of each one of those requests are, where they are in the workflow, and then it provides sort of the what stage they're in. I think there's like 5 stages within Priva. And we'll walk through those stages now. So I think for this one, we initially start at the data estimate stage. This is the first stage that happens when a request from WireWheel comes into Priva. During this stage, Priva takes the information that we gave it and it runs an initial search query against all of the different data repositories that I think Hamad kind of listed earlier. So it's searching out SharePoint and emails and all of that information, and it's trying to find any data that potentially relates to that data subject. Really, really powerful. You can also quickly kind of get a preview of what it returns. So you can see here, in this case, it found 10 items and it equaled 383 kilobytes. For this particular environment, we've only uploaded a few documents, and so that seems rather appropriate. For a larger environment, obviously you would get a better idea of like, I would be expecting hundreds of emails or a larger volume. So if you got bad information or the search query didn't return kind of what you were thinking, you can actually edit the search query down at the very bottom there. You can provide it more information, adjust the parameters a little bit, and rerun that search query. So this stage just is a data estimate. It's not actually grabbing the information back yet. It's just, I'm going to go back 2 seconds. If you look at the top right-hand corner there, you can see a retrieve button. So once you've kind of finalized and said, yeah, this data query looks good, and I think these are the right documents, you'd click retrieve, and Priva will then start to go to all those repositories and pull a copy of them into Priva so it can you can start working with it. So you hit that retrieve button, and it pulls all the data. Click on data collected, and this is where you can actually see the individual documents. This view is actually pretty powerful because within each one of these documents here, you can determine whether or not it's appropriate for the search that you're running. So you can say, yep, this belongs to John Doe and his request needs to be fulfilled. You can also, as I'm demonstrating here in this video, you can do redaction right inside of Priva. So this is really powerful if you've got sensitive information within your 365 environment that potentially you don't want to share every piece of information back to a privacy professional, and you want to make sure you redact it before it gets back to WireWheel. You can do that within Priva, which is really cool. And I'll show that here. It's just a quick area redaction. You just grab it and block it out, and it becomes redacted. And so then all of that will get updated in the PDFs that get sent to WireWheel at the end of this. And then when you're approving and rejecting documents there, you can provide some reasoning and some information about it. Once you've totally submitted all of the documents that you want, you hit generate reports. Priva will do its thing for a little while. And once the reports are completed, WireWheel will get a nice little message, hey, my reports are done. And it will go through and grab those from Priva and pull them in. And then we show here, we come back to that initial request. And we can navigate to a section where we can send those documents out to the consumer. You can also view the individual documents. You can get a preview of what they look like. You can edit the information about them. So sometimes when documents come back from Priva, they're just these long, lists of numbers and letters, don't really mean anything to you or the data subject who's requesting them. You can change the file names. You can add a description to them so that they're a little bit more meaningful to the person we're writing back to. You can type up a message to the data subject as well. And then when we're done, we'll go ahead and send that off to them. We send the selection to, it says to consumer, but it could be an employee or anybody else. We send that out, and then they'll receive an email with a link to a secure portal so that they can access that without having any sort of security issues. And I think that concludes the demo. Back to our slides.
Yeah, thanks, Sheridan.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, now we want to open it up to questions, and all the panelists can turn on your cameras. the first question. So we really want to encourage an open dialogue with those of you in the audience. So please put your questions in the Q&A. The first question we have is about redaction. So you showed a little bit of that, Sheridan, but the person is asking, how do you handle a realistic review redaction of requests that involves thousands of discovered documents?
Sorry, I
Sheridan,
picked myself off mute there. How do we handle a realistic request with thousands of documents? Yes, it is going to return quite a bit of documents. And I think ahead of time, it's important for companies to think about the strategy of what kinds of documents they will and will not provide, right? There may be documents that are just too sensitive to really provide back, or they're unable to really go through and validate through them whether or not there's tangential PI that would potentially be exposed. So I think it's up to every company to really determine their risk tolerance, and then develop the targeted search queries, right? So you can, inside Priva, you can really tailor down, hey, I only want to look for these types of documents or within these repositories. And so you can start to narrow that scope a little bit and make it more manageable.
Absolutely. I want to add a little bit of color to what Sheridan said. So remember when I was talking about like the policy templates, like you could, our strategy and our guidance to our customers is to try and minimize that data. Like there's just kind of like a built-in feedback loop that we're constantly sending to our information workers saying, hey, how do we help you minimize this data? Like, here's the document that you created. It has PII information. You haven't used it in the last X number of days. Of course, all of that is on the back of the policy that is configured in Microsoft Priva. And then just kind of like that gentle nudge to that information worker who created that document to say, hey, do you want to keep it? Do you want to delete it? What do you want to do with it? Like from a data lifecycle perspective, all of those things kind of help us minimize the data scope proactively. So when the request comes in, like you already have taken those steps to minimize. So that's kind of like a journey that we want to be with our customers on.
Yep, and I would further add to that, Hamad, in that even before that step, there's a concept of data classification, right? And not only data classification, but data retention. And what is your company's position on the life cycle of data from when you collect it to when it gets destroyed? How does it get classified? What use cases are appropriate? What use cases are not appropriate? And then to Hamad's point, the minimization concept. Minimization is important from a couple different points of view. One of which is the less you have, the less data that's vulnerable should you be compromised. The second of which is that the less data that you have, the less data that's exposed in a subject request, and then just dollars and cents, the less data that you are manipulating, the less it costs to manipulate that data.
Okay, so the next question is this functionality standard or an additional cost? So there's two pieces to that question. The first is WireWheel and the second is Microsoft. So let's start, Hamad, maybe you could just speak to kind of the license requirements, et cetera, for Microsoft, and then we'll add on to the WireWheel piece.
Yeah, no, happy to. So there are two parts to Microsoft Priva solution that I shared with you. One is the privacy risk management that does all the visibility into your data, insights associated with those. I'm looking at that right now. There's the privacy policy templates that I just kind of talked about. All of that is part of that. How do you customize it? How do you capture those signals? How do you recommend remediation controls? And then how do you engage with information workers? That's all part of the privacy risk management solution. That's $5 per user per month right now. And there's a trial of 90 days available, of course, so you can go and try that without any monetary commitments. The subject right request piece, where we spend most of our time today, is $200 per subject right request. And it is available in the blocks of 1, 10, and 100 requests. So like it's aggregated at the tenant level. So you can purchase those requests in those blocks. So that's how it works with WireWheel integration. Back to you, Judy.
Okay, so with WireWheel, as long as you have the Pro or Enterprise package, we charge for the integration. So it's as long as you have the Pro or Enterprise, it's just a charge for the integration into Priva. The next question is, how does WireWheel handle the user experience for requests submitted by authorized agents?
Yeah, so we have, inside of WireWheel, all of our workflows are very customizable. So in supporting authorized agents, we have the ability to, like in California particularly, you can ask if a request is being submitted for yourself or somebody else. And if it is for somebody else, then we would set up a workflow inside to gather the appropriate documentation and information necessary to prove that that person has the appropriate permissions and legal responsibility to submit those requests.
Okay, great. And then there's another question, I think, Sheridan, that's a good one for you, about WireWheel. Beyond Microsoft 365, is the system integrated with database systems where PII might also reside?
Yeah, so Priva itself, I think, is just Microsoft 365. WireWheel that's why WireWheel is such a powerful tool, right? We can integrate with, forget the exact number of low-code adapters that we have, but we can integrate with hundreds of systems out there very, very easily. And in those cases, you can set it up multiple ways, right? You could have a request that goes and requires a manual fulfillment by an individual to search for that information and provide it back. Or we can, in our professional services team, we can help customers build automated, tools to search for that data, pull it out, and bring it back into WireWheel. I think there was a secondary question: how do you ID proof and verify the request the customer's making? And does the legal team review the report before it's sent to the customer? So ID proofing, very difficult subject to really talk through in when it comes to DSAR requests, particularly given that there's been some noise lately from regulators in Europe about ID information being used and how we're gathering it and that kind of stuff. We have many different options that can be leveraged to ID proof individuals, whether and this is all about a company's risk tolerance, right? So if an individual company would like to collect ID information and have them upload that and have somebody verify it and review it, we can support that. If you would like to use an outside service, there are potential integrations there that we can use to verify an individual's ID and send you information back. Yes, it's been verified and you can move forward. And then separately, the third question, does the legal team review the report before it's sent to a customer request? I always, I've worked with hundreds of companies setting up DSARs, here at WireWheel and previous to before I joined. And I always recommend that the legal team is involved in reviewing DSAR requests before they go out the door. I just think there's a ton of risk in sending personal information to anybody, so I recommend it. But that again is up to the individual company to make a determination on how they would like their workflow built. WireWheel can support any and all configurations around that workflow.
Yeah, and the next question I think is for you, Hamad. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to add a little bit of color to what Sheridan said. Of course, coming from Microsoft Priva perspective, like for the employee request coming in, that employee already has the identity established in our system. So we have Azure Active Directory. There's a full identity lifecycle control that goes with that. So that identity is verifiable when we know where the request is coming from. So that's one part. The other part is that the thing is interesting for us to mention here is that there's a workflow piece associated with that. With the notion of Power Automate workflows, you can create all of those workflows. You can collaborate with the legal teams. Let's say you wanted to kick off a workflow. Maybe there's a ticket in ServiceNow that will trigger a third-party verification for an external ID and things along those lines. You can do that using Power Automate workflows. Just kind of wanted to share from a depth and breadth of the solution. That's a capability that our joint customers can leverage today.
Thanks. Yeah. There's a question, Hamad, about data discovery and classification, how Microsoft Priva handles it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's an awesome topic to spend some time on. So we have Microsoft Purview data lifecycle management. We have Microsoft Purview information protection. And we've had these capabilities for a number of years, and vast majority of enterprise customers are already using our classification and labeling capabilities. That's a very horizontal capability that we've built, and every product that we built on leverages that, and Microsoft Priva also leverages that. So classification, labeling, all of that magic that's happening in the background just kind of filters through seamlessly into Microsoft Priva, and you get to see what is the label associated with this document, and if there were classification and the policies that were triggered in the system, they come and apply to Microsoft Priva scope as well. So all of that is built in. If you add what Rick was saying in terms of data lifecycle management, the retention piece, the deletion piece, we have data lifecycle management product that exists and uses the same classification, labeling engine and capabilities. So all of that is integrated and it's built in, and it just kind of lights up in the Priva construct from a user experience perspective.
Okay, great. And then there's another question about WireWheel. Do we provide a service in terms of setup, customization, and response? Setting up your system, customizing it, and helping with response? And the answer is yes. Sheridan, do you want to talk just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, just trying to, does WireWheel provide a done-for-you service in terms of setup, customization, and response? Yeah, so we've got a number of different solutions that can help you here, right? So within professional services, which is the part of the organization and the WireWheel that I sit in, we can do a number of things to help clients. First, we can help them design their trust centers and set up a workflow to fulfill DSAR requests from the very beginning to the very end, right? So if you just need help identifying maybe what the data inventory is, where all that data lives, and what systems I might need to search for, and what keys I might need to use in order to search for that subject, we can absolutely help you do that. If you want somebody to help build forms within WireWheel so that you can facilitate those DSAR requests and get those workflows built out, we can do that for you as well. And then also, if you'd like to have somebody who sits and responds to your requests and gets them and kind of plays the the role of coordinating everything and getting all the responses back from systems and sending them back out to the consumer, we can do that for you as well in a managed services format. All of those are options. Just need to have a discussion.
Okay, great. And one last question: how can someone request a demo of this? I can answer that. And we'll put up that slide. Fill out a form on WireWheel or reach out. We'll put up a slide with everyone's contact information, and we can easily set up a demo and a POC if you're interested. Before we go, I just wondered, for the three of you who have so much experience with this, maybe just one or two tips for our audience as they think about approaching next year with all these new state laws, yet another one last week coming. What would you suggest are the one or two things? You talked a lot about kind of thinking through the data and how you want to respond and minimizing data. What are the one or two things that you would suggest that they do or start to think about? We could start with, who wants to go first? Ahmad?
I'll go first.
Or Rick,
I'll go first. I'm going to give very prescriptive advice. Don't wait till the week before Thanksgiving to start doing this. Because we're all going to be gone for the next 3 weeks, and then the law goes into effect when we come back from holidays. Start thinking about how you're going to deal with this today if you're not already thinking about it. And that's my short advice.
Thanks. Ahmad?
I'll add to what Rick said. Get to the demo tenant as quickly as you can, run it in your test environment, and see how it can help you solve for your privacy-related challenges.
And Sheridan?
I think for me, having helped a number of organizations implement at the last minute, what they missed the most was really having a good, solid data inventory, right? And so the sooner you can start figuring out where the data is and what data you need to respond to, the easier the implementation phase will be at the end. Because Otherwise, you'll be trying to integrate systems and build and run at the same time, which is just very hectic.
Okay, great. Thank you. So there have been several questions about the presentation. It'll be available on the website, and we'll respond after this with an email, including the link to the landing page and a recording of this webinar. Hamad, Sheridan, Rick, thank you so much. Everyone's contact information will be in the presentation, or you can reach out at info@wirewheel.io. And I want to encourage everyone, we have WireWheel is hosting a privacy conference June 22nd and 23rd. We cover all kinds of privacy topics, but our main focus this time is going to be on getting ready for all these new regulations, practical tips, advice from legal authorities and people in the field. And we'd like to encourage everyone to attend. You can register at our website, wirewheel.io/spokes. Thank you, everyone.